Welcome to the adventures of self. Conversations with ordinary and extraordinary people as they explore what it means to be self-expressed. Come on in. Join the adventure.
Welcome, Jeff Fetty, to the Adventures of Self.
Thank you, Taylor. It's great to see you. It's been way too long, brother.
It has indeed. I'm just going to give a very short intro because I know we'll get into a lot of things, but I don't want to sort of put you on the spot, but I'm going to do it from the beginning. You're one of the most interesting and varied and eclectic men that I've ever had the chance to know and spend time with. You're an inspiration to me to be quirky, outlandish, and to live by one's heart. You have been, I don't know how long, but you've been a blacksmith for, I'm guessing 30, 40 years. And not just a small-time blacksmith making horseshoes or hooks and latches, but working for some of the biggest names in the world. You've produced work for Tom Clancy, for the Whitehouse, for Yves Laurent, and lots more besides. And you also have so many other passions that I want to weave in as a photographer, as a traveler, as everything. And in particular, your sense of like how to be in this life. There is this irreverent reverence for being alive on this planet that I really appreciate. So I'll leave it at that, and let's get into having a conversation about it all.
Great. I appreciate your comments and compliments.
Yeah. So maybe just start, not necessarily from the beginning, but you're from a small town in rural West Virginia.
And I'm still here. I'm still in this small town.
Yeah. And you have, you're kind of a big fish in a small pond there.
I would say that's accurate.
Yeah. And you started your work, your career in sort of a barn shack.
Exactly.
And I mean, just to offer how you chose to get into blacksmithing.
Well, I think blacksmithing found me, and as soon as I saw someone hammer a hot piece of metal and transform it into something that's going to last forever, I was hooked. And to preface the story a little bit, a girl that I was dating, one of the very first dates, and I was 18 years old, and went to her house to pick her up, saw her father in a blacksmith shop, pulling out a hot piece of metal, sparks flying, the smell of coal smoke, the ringing of the anvil. And I thought, this is the coolest thing that I've ever seen in my life. And so my date's in the house waiting for me to take her out. And I'm down in the blacksmith with her dad, who I just met, cranking the blower and trying to figure out what was going on. And from that moment, I was passionate about blacksmithing. So after a few more dates like that, I decided to marry this girl. And I can say 48 years later, here I am banging on metal and living the dream and living with a wonderful woman that I think she still likes me. So it was a really interesting beginning. And not long after that, I set up a very small shed. It was a former barn, literally 12 feet by 14 feet, dirt floored, no heat, hand crank blower, hand crank drill press, no power tools, and worked there for 7 years hard. all at the same time. I had a job cutting meat in town, 40 hours a week, caretaking a large cattle farm, and blacksmithing every minute that I could. And that's the real synopsis version of my humble grassroots beginning. After that, I built a 24 by 40 shop and just kept building. And here I am. And in my third shop, and I look around every day and scratch my head and say, I'm still getting away with it. And how did I create all of this?
Mm. Yeah, I'm just sort of curious. I mean, like, because I've been to and worked in your second shop, and you know, it's a kind of a tool lover's paradise. I mean, you can see, for anybody who's watching the video, and I encourage, if you are listening to this, to go check out the YouTube, because you want to see what a blacksmith shop and forge looks like, and the tools that are involved. Jeff is surrounded by them. And you know, there's this, when you walk in, you know, on one hand, it's kind of a bit intimidating. It's like there's all this stuff. There's anvils and coal and fire and, you know, hammers and different jigs and all sorts of different things going on. And yet there's this excitement. It's like, wow, there's so much that one can make with this. And think about, you know, blacksmithing. You know, I think we're so removed from the concept now of what it means to be making things for ourselves in our lives, right? I mean, the blacksmith shop was one of the most central, important aspects of villages and communities going back hundreds of years, you know, in America, in Europe, all over the world. And still you go places and there's a blacksmith shop, right? That because it is servicing and serving the community for all sorts of, as you say, items that last, you know, lifetimes and you know, hundreds of years. Yeah, and so there is this, like, you know, it's a really fundamental, visceral, heavy, practical industry, but also can be very private, right? It's just you, one man, and a forge, really.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel that's the one reason that blacksmithing excited me so much from the beginning, and it still excites me, that a blacksmith, myself, we have the ability to make our own tools. And there's rarely a commission that I accept that I don't have to spend time at the beginning of the project to make my own tools, whether it's a specific hammer or chisel or a pair of tongs or a jig. But just the fact that a blacksmith has the ability to make basically any tools that they need. And you know, the fact is what you were just saying, back, you know, thousands of years ago, hundreds of years ago, the most important member of any community was the blacksmith. Not only did the blacksmith make tongs and horseshoes, but he also made nails and hammers and forceps for dentists, surgical instruments, anything metal the blacksmith made. And as a young blacksmith, I always fantasized about living in my community 100 years, 200 years before, and making all the tools. I'm making, you know, art, but I also love making tools. And then I found some rural blacksmiths in Egypt that were still doing that, and which takes me to my travels to Mexico. And I've been there a number of times, photographing, documenting blacksmiths. I have a large collection of tools from Mexico. And and I'll give a big shout out to my great friend John Warner, who has worked for 50 years in the backwoods of Mexico, so to speak, and where he takes me in Mexico as my guide would give most Mexicans culture shock. But I've been really fortunate to ride on his coattail and have photographed dozens and dozens of blacksmiths where they're still making hoes and mattocks and spud bars. So that was a dream come true for me, is to go to super rural areas where the blacksmith is still the most important member of the community. They just don't go to Lowe's or the hardware store when they need a hoe. They go to the blacksmith shop. That's very gratifying for me to see.
And I think as you speak about that, I mean, I've met John and spent some time with him, and there is this sense, just sort of, you know, recalling in some of your other friends, right, who are artists, but, you know, very high class artisan craftsmen in the sort of larger West Virginia community. And there is this sense I get of, you know, an appreciation for, you know, you grew up in a rural, mostly rural. I mean, it's a town. It's, you know, it's a bigger town than it was, but, you know, it's pretty, you know, small by many people's like city standards, and an appreciation for that sense of community, and the connection, right? So there's art, you know, artists like yourself and artists like John Warner, others who are like, you know, you're connecting to your community and producing art, but also a sense of a very practical sense of what it means to do that. I mean, John, I remember going to his place and as a photographer, and he was, you know, developing, all of his own film, but from running water that was coming off the creek, not sort of from the tap, and you know, being very much in the element of, you know, living very close to the land, and you know, for people that don't realize, I mean, sort of West Virginia in American standards has somewhat of a, you know, backwoods kind of backwards reputation, and yet when you go there, I mean, it's beautiful, and people still, you know, are living very close to, connected to seasons, land, nature elements, and that, you know, shows through in your art in particular.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel that, you know, I could put a shop anywhere. I could put my studio in New York City or Charlotte, North Carolina, but I chose to live in this super rural setting. There's 2,500 people in our little community here. But you know, we're able to harvest our own meat, grow our own food. It's a very close-knit community. All of the tradesmen help each other. I can't imagine having the success that I've had in a larger metropolitan area. It's just a really close-knit community. I have a tremendous amount of resources. I have an incredible large team. You know, for an example, a couple of weeks ago, we were putting together a monumental piece of sculpture, and my fork truck dies on me, and I was able to call a friend, and in 15 minutes, he drives his fork truck up the mountain, and you know, I have a fork truck to finish the project. I need a piece of pipe. I need a piece of material. It's close-knit little community. It's very easy to get things done here. I don't know if that answers your question, or
yeah, and I just I mean, you know, I've been to Spencer several times, and it's a very unique place. I mean, 2,500 people. I don't know if it's still operating, but it had a tofu production factory.
It is not, but
it's not.
Okay.
But you know, I mean, for a small community like that to be making its own tofu in rural West Virginia is quite remarkable. And I think, I don't know if it was the first time I came to visit you. Before it was knocked down, the old mental hospital, the old state mental hospital, which I think at one time I think you told me had the longest hallway or second longest hallway in the world, maybe certainly longest in the US. It was like a quarter of a mile long. And I think, I don't know, maybe we kind of snuck our way in and sort of
no, not us, Taylor. Of course we did.
Yeah, I mean, and so there's like these elements that kind of, it's not just sort of some sleepy community with a bunch of retired people. There's a vibrancy, and as you say, like there's a quirkiness that I mean, like you fit into that very, very well. And maybe you were sort of one of the larger characters, but it's an aspect of you that comes out.
Yeah, the folks here are great. The local folks are great. I will say, back in the early 70s, there was an influx of homesteaders, back to landers that came in, dozens, hundreds. And I immediately attached myself to those folks, folks from, I was 16, 17 years old, not traveled at all. And people would be coming in from far away places like Baltimore, Maryland, and New York City, and bringing different cultures, different religions into our community. And I feel indebted to that movement and these folks, many who I am still great friends with. So that influx of folks has really, I feel, has been extremely beneficial to our area.
Yeah, I'm also curious just to get a little bit of a flavor as well to describe sort of your experience, because I remember the old shop before you moved up on top of the mountain. I mean, you had to kind of drive into one of these, like we call them hollers, in West Virginia, where you kind of going back into something that feels a bit sort of enclosed, and there's just trees everywhere, and it's just like, I mean, it was just an incredibly peaceful place. You built your own home from scratch. You put together the shop, or this 20 by 40 shop, and then kept adding on to it and adding things. It goes to the sense of your, I mean, I assume it's a desire, or maybe it's a necessity, but to like you say, build your own tools, you build your own home, you cut your own meat. There's a real self-reliance, self-sufficiency, which is also, I think, part of the the West Virginia backbone, the culture that's there.
Well, definitely it was out of necessity and for the financial aspect of it. But even back in the day, even if we had the cash, I still would have done it my way. It's so gratifying to know what you're eating, to mill the lumber. Not necessarily that I go to the sawmill, buy the lumber, dry it, pick up rocks out of the rivers, build our own stone walls. It's fun. And I think the results are better than anything that you can buy. So I think it's, it's for both reasons, but probably back in the day, it was more out of the need for necessities, because that's the only way that we could get things done, is to do it ourselves. Yeah. Now I do it because it feels good and it's fun, and I still enjoy it. And it's better than going to the gym. It's still a great workout to burn your own wood and grow your own food.
You mentioned Mexico, and I know you've gone off, you've traveled lots of different places, and as you say, you have this real appreciation for how things are done in other countries, in Egypt and Mexico, where there still are, this need, I suppose, right? They don't go down to the hardware store. They don't order on Amazon what they need. They make it, and you have this, like, because you're connected to it, there's a real appreciation for that, and I know through John, you developed a real love and talent for photography.
Exactly. Well, when I first started traveling a lot, and never as a small kid growing up in rural West Virginia that I ever thought that I would travel as much as I have, and there's still a lot of friends and neighbors that live here that will never get the opportunity to travel, and that's the one reason that I became interested in becoming a better photographer, and it was to document my travels and share it with people back home, to share it with people in my community. And I remember back in the day when I was traveling to Europe on a regular basis and traveling to Mexico, I would do community slideshows just to share my adventures. So that's one reason that I became a better photographer. And it's important as a businessman, as a business person, to provide really great photographs of your work. And I used to use professional photographers. It was just too expensive, and often I would finish a project and there would only be 24 hours before the installation. So I had to learn to make quality photographs of my own work. And, for the obvious reason, it really makes you see the world in a different way. It trains your eye to be more appreciative what you're already appreciative of.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to bring in a story just to connect this back. Staying on the theme of photography, because it's one thing to photograph your own work. It's another thing to go to on travels and photograph some things. But it's quite another to photograph yourself in the grips of an emergency room situation.
Yeah, I know where you're going with this.
Yeah. So, because you were saying, right, you have a lot of equipment. You got a big shop, and you started with maybe just an anvil and a hammer, making some tongs, but eventually, you make big pieces now, big commercial pieces, and you got some big pieces of equipment that use a lot of power and have a lot of force. And I don't know. I mean, it's been what, 15, nearly 20?
Yeah, probably 15 years ago.
Yeah. So
what's your question, Taylor?
Well, I'd like to hear the story. I mean, I've heard the story, but my listeners won't have heard the story of what happened.
And you're referring to my smashed hand.
Yes.
Yes, of course you are. This one. Hey, I still have all five, but it was a long road. It was a long recovery. I simply got caught up in a hydraulic press and almost lost 3 fingers. Split my little finger in half the long way, and almost lost these 2 fingers. It was not a great morning. An assistant takes me to the emergency room, and at that point, I couldn't look at it. I wanted to look at it. I wanted to see it, but I make my living with my hands, and I was afraid to see how my career was going to be impacted. So I get to the emergency room, tremendous amount of pain, and I finally got the courage to look at it. And as soon as I looked at it, I saw a photograph. Oh, I must photograph this. So I called the shop, had one of my assistants to grab my camera, bring it to the hospital, and I did a documentation of the hand before and after, every stitch going in, and surgeon was actually my light guy. He was putting light exactly. Can you move the light over a little bit to the left, doctor? Yeah, but we're gonna have to get this thing fixed, Jeff. And so yeah, I wanted it for documentation. I also wanted it to put out to my craftsman community, my blacksmith community, saying, be careful. I'm an experienced guy, and this can happen to me. It can happen to any of us. And I had several blacksmith friends from around the globe that I sent the photo to that taped it on their machinery as a reminder. So yeah, I was down and out for a while, but I also felt that I was helping other craftspeople to be more cautious.
Because I mean, I remember talking to you about this. I mean, you work in a blacksmith shop and you have commission, and on the one hand, you're working around tools and have done for decades, so there's a sort of familiarity with it all, and also, on a particular commission job, you may be up against a deadline, and you may think, well, this is going to take 2 days or 12 hours or whatever it's going to be, and it takes a lot more, and you're working hard. You're working 12, 16-hour days. Absolutely. You're tired, and you want to get things done, and you think, I know what I'm doing. And it goes to how quickly and easily accidents can happen.
Boom, just like this.
And I think famously, I mean, it's like not to bring it back to pain, but I mean, you actually, what you explained to me was that you were working with a hydraulic press that was foot operated, and you had a piece in between two plates with your hands kind of putting it in, and you pressed down, and it had an initial pressure that probably didn't do too much damage. And
then my brain switched. I was in panic mode, and all I at that point needed to do was to release, and the hydraulic would have came back up. It would have retracted. But I'm thinking, what do I do? What do I do? And my brain, for whatever, made the wrong decision, and I pressed the pedal down and watched my hand get mushed. Talk about feeling silly. We're just like, holy shit, man. How did I just do that? I had a chance to escape and I blew it.
Yeah, I mean,
did you have to remind me of that? Did you have? Thanks, Taylor.
My pleasure, Jeff. Anyway, it's for the good of the listeners. No, but I think it's amazing, right? Because it goes to the sense of like, I mean, it's a reality, right? And like, obviously there is a pain in that, but I really appreciate and love you for choosing to take photos and document this thing. And I appreciate it. There is this sense that for the community, but also there is a part of you. I mean, it kind of gets to what I said at the beginning. There's this, you throw yourself into life. So whatever it is, whether it's making great art or documenting a severed hand, you are in it 100%.
Well, why wouldn't I be? Why wouldn't anyone be?
Well, exactly. And
I don't understand your question. So what? Yeah, that's what we do, man.
Yeah, cool. Well, I'll take it on a slightly different, but also equally dedicated aspect of your life. Because when I don't know if you have this tradition in the new shop, but you've had people work for you, and people come through. I mean, I spent a couple months apprenticing and doing some work with you and doing my own stuff, and really loved it. And at the time, I think your son Jacob was doing some time in the shop. There was another guy in the shop, and every day at lunch, right? We'd stop for lunch for whatever it was, half an hour, maybe it was an hour. I don't remember.
20 minutes.
20 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Okay. 20 minutes. Right. Strict. Yeah. I
22
didn't think
minutes.
it was an hour, but I
Well,
thought.
because we had to leave 10 minutes at the end of lunch for where
Exactly.
you're going. Okay.
Yeah. Right. So yeah. Well, so there was 22 minutes or 20 minutes, and then what so to fit in the half hour, there's a tree outside, a little bit downhill from one of the barn, or sort of the door openings of the shop.
Right.
And it was about sort of, I don't know, 15 feet away, downhill a bit. And there's a nice tree, had some nice, like, really spread out branches, but and it just seemed like inviting.
So are you asking me to tell the story, or
well, I mean, we can share the story, but I mean,
go ahead. Go ahead, but
so everybody for dessert would have a banana.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We went through a lot of bananas.
And
then we would have a friendly competition of who could put a banana peel on one of the branches. And we all had different techniques. We had a line that you couldn't cross. We had a 2-page handwritten set of rules. And we were very serious about our banana peel contest every day. We were all 100% into it. We were 100% into our work. And if you're going to do something, do it right. And it was highly competitive. This banana peel throwing contest. And the visitors that would come would just like, what are these guys? These guys are out of their tree. But we had a good time with it. And I bet that, after all of these years, you still remember the enjoyment that we had from throwing banana peels on the branch of a tree, and who could see if it stuck or not. And I can remember sometimes the bananas would swing, the peels would swing back and forth, and then they would fall off, and everyone would go, "Oh, man. Oh, almost. Okay, Mario, you're up. Okay, Taylor, you're up." Take deep breaths.
Weekly paychecks were lost on competitions, and people's livelihoods, and their standing in the community was based on their ability to hook a banana peel onto a tree. And it was, as you say, deeply competitive, but deeply entertaining. And I appreciate the 2 pages of handwritten rules that determined how to adjudicate any disputes. Yeah.
Well, we didn't want any fist fights. We go to rule number 7, page 2. Clearly, da. Oh, okay. Well, wait till tomorrow. I'm going to kick your butt.
And there is this sense of, like you run a tight ship, a tight shop, and you're very serious about the work you do, and happy to talk about some of the work, and we'll get into that a little bit. But just a sort of another little anecdote, because sometimes visitors to the shop, I mean, it's a fascinating, right? I mean, kind of, for many people, like, you got these Tom Clancy's and whomever, high fly and high roller people who, for even regular folk going into a blacksmith shop is quite extraordinary, because we just don't have exposure to that, really. And so, there's all this great stuff. Here's a forge, here's a huge, 2-ton hammer, and all these different, the anvils and tools. But you also sometimes would have, interesting surprises for people. So there's one frozen surprise I know about that was on offer.
Yes, and I got a lot of mileage out of that frozen friend. And the story goes, one of my assistants, superstar Lucas, who is a wild man in his own right, caught some live rattlesnakes a couple hours north of here and asked me if I would like to have a rattlesnake. And I said, sure. And and I thought that he was going to bring me a butchered rattlesnake. But no, he walks in the shop with a 5-foot timber rattlesnake in a 5-gallon bucket without a lid. Now, maybe it had a lid, but a rattlesnake can't climb like a copperhead or a black snake can climb out of a bucket. Rattlesnake can't. Lucas could tell us what that term is. And it was, you kick the bucket and then the the rattlesnake would rattle. The one thing I'm most proud of the new shop, we've been here a dozen years, is it's large enough and we have a pavilion that we do a lot of social events here, fundraisers, roundtable discussions for dignitaries coming through the area. I really enjoy using the shop as a community center. So, sometimes there's 50 or 100 people here in an evening. So anyway, back to the rattlesnake. That particular evening, we had an event, and I didn't have time to butcher the rattlesnake before the event. So I just put a lid on it and put it under the table. And as the evening went on, the word got out about the rattlesnake in the 5-gallon bucket, and people would kick the bucket and the rattlesnake would rattle and people would freak out and everyone had a good time. So the next morning I was going to get the rattlesnake out and butcher it. And I looked at the rattlesnake and I go, man, I've never butchered a rattlesnake before. I really, I don't want to get injured again. I don't want to get nailed. So I thought, okay, I'm going to put the whole 5-gallon bucket in the refrigerator, and that's going to slow it down. So I have a better chance. So I put it in the refrigerator. I was working on a large commission. Next day I come in, rattlesnake was a lot slower. And I thought, if it's frozen, it's even going to be a lot slower. So I tilted the bucket, the rattlesnake crawls into the freezer. And this was a refrigerator in my shop. It crawled into the freezer side of the refrigerator and curled up and froze. And was there for several years. And a lot of guests that, especially people that there were just a few people that I was really to scare the hell out of for the rattlesnake. During an event, I would say, hey, can you we would be cooking, can you hand me some ice cubes? And they would open the refrigerator and just have a meltdown because the rattlesnake was there, coiled, ready to strike. I've got a lot of mileage out of Mr. Rattlesnake.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay. Well,
and also just on snakes, because it just reminded me that you told me once that you had an opportunity to go to one of these holy roller. These are. I don't even know how to describe, but you had an opportunity to go into a church that not many people get to go into.
Exactly.
Snake handle churches.
Yeah, that was in Wyoming County, it was in Mercer County, southern West Virginia, about 3 hours south. And at that time, my son Nathan was in high school, and we were just really interested in going to one of these services. So we made the trip down and talked to a couple church members, and they said, sure, come on in. And I asked the pastor at the time if I could make a video. And he said, no, NBC was just here. We're one of the national news stations, and they didn't give us favorable press, and you can't make a video. So as the service was getting ready to start, the pastor came back to me and said, you're not with the press. And I said, no, sir. And any video I take, I'll only use for my own use. And he said, well, you can go ahead and make a video. So out to the van, picked up my camera and came back in. And Taylor, I've been into some situations where things are lively, and I've been to a lot of wild parties or, you know, loud events and spirited events, but I had never witnessed anything of this magnitude. To start with, the church was a little wooden structure ledged over a cliff, so it was a little wobbly, shaky to start with. And they had a band up front, instruments, electric guitar, an organ, set of drums, and boom, the service starts, and the woman on the keyboard sang exactly like Janis Joplin. The guitar player was playing like Jimi Hendrix, the drum, and the place was absolutely rocking and shaking. And about that time, they had boxes with copperheads and rattlesnakes and pulled the snakes up out of the boxes and let them coil in their hands. And this one guy in particular just spun himself into intoxication, and just, you know, with the music. And my son and I looked at each other with our jaws down to our stomach, like, what is happening here? This is the most incredible thing that I've ever seen. And even after a 3-hour service, we went to the van and we were like speechless. We just looked at each other and said, did this really happen? I had to look back at my video just to make sure that this really happened before I started the van, and then drove 3 hours back home. It was an incredible adventure experience.
Yeah, cool. And you know, like your life, I mean, like mine, and I haven't been anything like that, but and you know, this show, I mean, it's all about adventure. So thanks for sharing that. It's and I suppose, I mean, even in West Virginia, that's a unique experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Not too many people get to experience that. And I'm really happy that we made the effort to make that one happen.
I want to maybe move into your art. I mean, we've spent a lot of time talking about your experience and the shop and how you got into it. But you know, I mean, you're a world-class artist. I mean, you're world-renowned. You've displayed and been in competitions, or you know, exhibits around the world, and you know, you've had a pretty impressive list of clients. You're you know, and you've gone from, you know, making those small things to bigger. There was a lot of furniture, a lot of art. Now you're making, you know, bigger commission work for communities. You know, I mean, and you really, you know, a lot of the work that I've seen is like it's very based on natural form. You know, it's very floral. It's, you know, your tables, your everything. I mean, there's a connection. It's as if you're creating an organic form into metal.
Yes. That's what I do.
Yeah.
And I like to yeah, I like to do it on a larger scale as well, but I'm not. I'm not sure if I totally understand the question. Um, yeah, I love making furniture, but I also love making large scale sculpture. Currently we are doing a 20-foot tall piece of sculpture for a local hospital, and it is natural form tulips. So the first thing that I do is grow tulips, buy paper tulips, go to the different flower shops and surround myself with tulips and take them apart and study them, and then put them back together, and then cut a piece of metal and repeat that same process, but on a large scale with a team of assistants, developing tools and techniques that, for an example, on the large tulips, we developed a technique that I've never seen before, which is, we went out in the woods and cut a large oak stump, took a chainsaw, carved out a big gouge in it, and then built a spring spud bar, so to speak, and made different tools for the bottom. And it takes a team, and I love working with a team. It takes a team of guys to hold the metal, to, not only a physical team, but a mental team. And I love working with people, developing techniques, and maybe I'll have an idea and someone else will expand on it and make it better. And I just love that whole dynamics with different people to get the end result. And I can say without hesitation, during my entire career, I would meet with architects and designers, and they would want a curved railing going down 2 flights of stairs, and they'd say, "Well, Fetty, can you do this?" "Sure, I can do it." And on my way home, I would be scratching my head. "How in the hell am I going to do this? I've never done that before." But there's a great team. I have a great team here, but I also have a great international and national team. Because there's so few blacksmiths that have done, massive gates or curved rails. And, I have a great friend in Jacksonville that specializes in curved railings. I have another friend in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, another guy in Michigan, that I've met at various conferences over the last 40 plus years. And everyone is so free with their information. It's and I think that we all know that blacksmithing is an extremely difficult trade to learn, and no one person knows everything. And I have people, I specialize in finishes and fly press work. And I have blacksmiths around the country calling me and say, "Hey, Fetty, I've got this da-da-da-da-da. Can you help me?" Yeah, let me walk you through it. I have a set of gates. I pull in my buddy David from Jacksonville. Well, you need to come down and we'll make this specific tool. So yeah, I guess it takes a team. It takes a village. People say, "How have you accomplished everything that you have accomplished?" Not by myself. That's for damn sure. It's the team.
Mm. Yeah, and I think it's interesting because you've got your own sort of employees, or people that freelancers or contractors that may work with you. But I think what really comes through is that sense of the support that the community provides.
Huge support.
Because there's so few people working at particularly the scale. There's some weekend blacksmith who,
right,
the craftsman who makes some latches and hooks, and that's cool, that's awesome. But I think particularly when you get to the scale you're talking about, and figuring things out on a much larger scale, creating, totally new ways of doing things. There is this willingness and desire to
Absolutely.
support and I guess be part of something that somebody else is doing, because there's a dedication to the craft itself that goes beyond you as an individual artist.
Yeah, there's a lot of hobbyist blacksmiths. There's several hundred blacksmiths around the country. A lot of people that have forges set up in their garage and they do the weekend work. But on the scale of work that I'm doing in the world, there's not too many people doing what we are doing, and people are very, very willing to share their knowledge on the lines of, talking about how helpful my blacksmith friends have been, back to my community, and whether it's a plumber or a carpenter, or, the story about having a fork truck here in 20 minutes. But, the one thing that I would like to say is I've had a great list of wonderful patrons over the years. People that always made sure that I had enough work. They always were looking out for me, probably without me even knowing that they were looking out for me. People with the means to commission me, people with means to buy my work, and I really am grateful and appreciate the early patrons, especially that believed in me more than I believed in myself. A shout out to those folks, and you know who you are.
Yeah, I mean, it's I suspect, and just maybe a question, having that support and connection allows you to grow into where you are now, right? Because you had to sort of a small shop where you're doing that kind of weekend blacksmithing while you're working a full-time job, and then able to develop into the shop you had before and start to work on bigger projects. But I mean, obviously you got to learn your craft first and foremost, and then develop a reputation where people are going to say, well, because this is not sort of off the shelf. Well, this is $29.99, or here's something for $50 or whatever it is. I mean, things that you work on. I mean, some things I know were small, and you may have had a bit more production, but the vast majority of your work, almost all of it is custom, right? And I also want to get into, like, where is that going? Because we're in such a, now you're in this kind of like digital print world and die cutting, and like just laser cutting everything sort of into, and it can be quite exquisite, but it's not hand forged. It's not the figuring all that out, and so it does take the patrons to say, yep, we're going to support Jeff, we're going to support whomever in this field.
Yeah, and lucky me, couple of my favorite sayings. One is the harder I work, the luckier I get. Another favorite saying is by Ansel Adams, which is luck favors the prepared mind. Yeah, I've had a lot of great breaks. One of the things that I learned early on is that, and I think that's what makes me different than a lot of crafts people and artists that weren't able to make a living, is I had to learn business skills. I learned early on that 50% of the money is made in the office and 50% of the money is made in the forge. So your business skills have to be just as good or better than your forging skills. So, I read a lot of business books. I hung out with a lot of good businessmen, women, that gave me a lot of good advice. And now the commissions I'm doing, I have to, for an example, I did a large project for a private ranch in Texas a couple years ago, and there's all of these, there was the contracts and getting a team together in the middle of the desert to put up this monumental piece of sculpture. I had to orchestrate the concrete to the welder to getting the crane there. There's, it's a lot more than hammering steel. It's, contracts and negotiations and lighting and how to light the sculpture. So, the actual work is really a fairly small piece of it. It's everything else that has to be done to pull off a large piece of sculpture. And I enjoy it all. It's all fun. Sometimes it's stressful, but by and large, it's by and large, Taylor, I try to say to myself every day, I'm still getting away with it.
I know you, just on that, because you spoke to me last time that over the years, you have really appreciated, what you've been given in this life, and recognize that, I also, there are many people out there who've had a fortunate life, and maybe you've worked hard to create that, but the humility and the appreciation, and you've created a club around that.
I have created a club. One of my dear friends is an architect friend of mine. His name is Michael Corliss, and we have done a lot of major projects together. He is an architect and designer and builder that integrates art into architecture, and I've done some great projects for his jobs over the years, and we became brothers from different mothers. And late at night, one night we were talking just about how fortunate we are, how lucky we are, how thankful we are. And just in jest, I said, Corliss, what we need to do is to form a club. I'm not a club kind of guy. Benjamin Franklin, he was a club kind of guy, but what's the club, Fetty? I said, the Lucky Fuckers Club, LFC. And let's create a club and send out invitations just for people that feel as fortunate as we are. And so had our friend John Warner to design us some great invitation cards, which I'm going to break our rules. I did meet with the board of directors about getting you into the LFC club, Taylor. But we have bumper stickers and official invitations, and we have over 50 members now. I'm the president. We have senior vice president, which is Mike Corliss. Some well-known West Virginia artists, Paula Clendenin, Gail Twiggershaw's on the board of directors. We have over 50 members now, and it's growing by leaps and bounds. In fact, we're getting ready to do a second printing of LFC bumper stickers. And so, Taylor, we all are lucky fuckers.
We are indeed. And there's a deep appreciation for that. Yeah, as soon as we started speaking about it, I realized that I am also a lucky fucker.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we are.
I know there's normally an age restriction, so it sounds like you spoke to the board.
We have made an exception for you.
Wow. I am
65 and over, but
I've got a ways to go, not that long, but a few years, and so I feel deeply humbled and even more of a lucky fucker to it's like double lucky. Yeah.
Well, before COVID hit, we really were going to have a convention, at a state park or probably at the Forge. We would have had a convention here or Yeah. And that would have been a lot of fun for a bunch of old lucky fuckers to get together and share stories. And we even had a band lined up, and there's a winery next door, so this would be the perfect venue. But when COVID lets up, we will have an LFC convention here at Jeff Fetty Designs.
Fantastic. Well, I will make an effort to be back in the States to participate. Yeah. And I mean, I just sort of spoke about it, that you're the artisan of your craft, right? The unique nature of your craft. And I'm just curious, like, what do you see? Where do you see this going? I mean, you've been involved in this for nearly half a century, and you're handing it on to future generations. And
Well,
are we going to have blacksmiths? Are we still going to have blacksmiths, or is everything going to be coming out of a computer? And
I think that there will always be a demand for high quality forged work, always. And that's one reason that it's so important to share the craft with the younger generations. For me personally, I'll be 68 in a few weeks. I have absolutely no desire or interest in retiring. It's just, I remember one of my sons, whenever he was a little boy, he said to me, one of the biggest compliments, and boy, he nailed it. He's in his 40s now, and he was probably 10. He said, Dad, I've been thinking, with your job, you probably never will retire. You'll probably just always do what you love. And I thought, yeah, that's you're exactly right. And so I think retirement is something that I would fail at. And I don't want to fail at anything. I want to succeed in everything. So I don't know. With that said, yeah, I'm already to the point that I'm picking and choosing commissions. I'm turning work down. Back in the day, I was grabbing every piece of work, every commission, every request, and cultivating it just to make a living. But now it's taken me a few years to learn that I can say no. Well, no, I'm not really doing that type of work any longer. I'm just doing A, B, and C. So that's pretty luxurious. I can do the work. Fact is, there's only so much iron left in these veins, and I want to make what the hell I want to make.
Yeah. I mean, when you're working on commissions like this big tulip project, I mean, how much at this point, because of your success and renown, how much of it is really your crafting, or how much of it is commission? Like back in when you're getting started, I suppose it's more of like you're a well-talented hired gun to produce something. I mean, obviously you got to have input of what's practical and what does and doesn't work.
Yeah, I still enjoy taking the work that pushes me to a place that I've never been. I want to do something that I've never done before. And with the large tulip sculpture I was mentioning it earlier, our team came up with I'll send you a video of that. It's really quite interesting, and maybe I should get that on my YouTube table, or my YouTube channel, which, by the way, I do have the YouTube channel, which is very outdated. I probably haven't added in anything to it for the last 10 years. But yeah, I'm not positive if I'm properly answering your question.
It's all right. I mean, it's just
You're just, it's not a question.
I don't remember if it was a question. I think it was just
okay.
an intro to
Okay.
well, I just want to bring in one, because it's like there's so many aspects of you, and I mean, yes, your career has been blacksmith, but something you mentioned to me last time, which I think just gives another sense of who you are, because I think it was relatively new since the last time we spent any significant time together, is that you become an ordained minister.
Well, so to speak.
Okay.
That's 2 clicks of the internet, and you can become an ordained minister. And it was literally 2 clicks of the internet, and sending $25 to the Secretary of State's office, and I can legally perform wedding ceremonies. And I've been doing that for about 10 years. I really enjoy it. It's the last thing that I ever thought that I would be doing, is performing wedding ceremonies on a regular basis. And how I initially got into it, I wouldn't have done it, except I had a young couple who I'm very, very close with, came to me about a dozen years ago and said, "Hey, we want to get married. We want someone that we love, honor, and respect to do the ceremony, and someone that loves and honors and respects us." And I thought, well, that's cool. They like me more than I thought they did. And, and so I called my son, who is an attorney, and I said, "Hey, how can I pull this off?" He did a little research. Universal Church of Life in California, 2 clicks, doesn't cost any money. I did make a contribution. And the word got out. And to date, I've done over 40 ceremonies, from people walking into the shop wanting to get married immediately, to high-end ceremonies for a magazine publisher. A lot of my best friend's granddaughter, my best friends. I have a lot of best friends. My best friend's daughters. And I take it very seriously, and work with the bride and groom to, get them the exact ceremony that they want. And it's big fun. I really enjoy it.
Well, no surprise that you take it seriously and dive in fully to it, and it's just a further expansion of who you are as a person. So thanks for sharing that. Jeff, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I think we've had a rousing discussion of the things that, we could go on. I mean, I know there's so many other stories, and I mean, recently you had a kidney taken out and asked your doctor to save it for catfish bait. You were part of demonstrating at an exhibit or a design show in southern France, and you and a colleague designed metal lingerie for the show. And you've had a lot of accolades, and you bring a real professionalism and humor and love of life to all you do, and you've been an inspiration for me, and I'm very happy to call you a friend.
Very happy and honored to call you a friend. And don't forget our agreement from the get-go, airline tickets to London.
Right.
So if you want to go ahead and
sure,
and give me your credit card number, we can facilitate that.
Oh,
and I'll
they'll
talk you over.
Oh, they'll be delivered by a chauffeur in a velvet envelope, because first class tickets, of course. You don't want to be just messing around with that. Things can get messed up on the internet. So I'll of course have my team of people get that chauffeured the tickets over to you in the velvet envelope, so that
I knew that I could count on you.
Yes.
Hey, it's been a pleasure, my friend.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeff. Really, really appreciate your time.
I appreciate your interest.